John Reinke. I was park manager for, 14 plus years or something like that.
John, I'm licensed in 7 states. I don't know if I'm allowed to give the oath. I don't know if it means a thing, but do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth today?
I do.
Okay. What my intention is to take your statement back to Florida. We get them transcribed for my team, and then I come up with kind of what you said. I'm gonna pour that into what I need, probably send it to you, or come back out here and say this, and you're gonna say yep, and that'll be our affidavit for the court case. When I interviewed Alan, I kind of knew what Alan had said or was going to say. He's going to talk about perjury. With you, I didn't. There's the old expression: a lawyer never asks a question that he doesn't know the answer to. This is how I find out the answers. We need to crawl through some stuff. And it can be, we can skip around, it's not a deposition by any stretch of the imagination.
I'm not a date guy, okay? Right. I'm 55 years old, my memory ain't worth a damn, so if you want to pinpoint a date, it's going to be tough for me to do.
That's fine.
But I can tell you that, Joe's attorneys, his first attorneys were the first ones to talk to me, and they didn't talk very long.
Yeah.
And when they left, I told them, I said, y'all don't have enough paperwork, first of all. And they looked at me and says, we have other cases we have to take care of.
Huh.
And they left. So I knew then it was going to be a shit show.
So those are the public defenders you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many things. So why, in your opinion, or what happened as to why you weren't called at trial?
I honestly feel they didn't want to know what I had to say, because I know some stuff that they didn't want to put on stand. They didn't want to use because it would just debunk their case. The biggest thing is that $3,000 check. I was there when me and Joe talked about that probably a day or two before that. Said that wasn't given to him to pay to kill Carol. I mean, I was there.
Tell me about it.
I mean, we talked about it. We'd had so much problems with Alan running and telling Jeff everything we do. I mean, if we took a crap, Jeff Lowe knew about it before anybody. And we got tired of it. And Joe and Alan kept having words. And Alan wouldn't stay away. He kept staying close enough he could hear and stuff. And Joe just got tired of it. So we talked about it in the office one day. And I just told him, I said, send him home. He says, he won't go home because of Jeff. I said, give him a check, send him home. I said, no matter what it costs, send him home. Yeah. Get him out of here, fire him. I said, all that man wants to do is go somewhere and drink. And we discussed it, and Joe says, I'll try. And that's what the $3,000 was, is to get him out of our hair, to get the rat out of our hair. Because we were just running a business. We were just running it just like we normally do.
How much fraud was James doing around that time that you're aware of, with like identity fraud and all that?
Well, I didn't like James to start with because he sold me a stolen Hummer. Okay, so he was obviously conning people for, and when it came back as stolen, it came back as identity theft. So he was stealing identities. So that was already going on. They approached me to take a credit card to my doctors and cash the credit card without doing the surgery. And I said, I need my doctors. I said, that is not going to happen. I said, so don't even ask me.
Yeah, you don't want to ruin a
But they did ask me. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to need doctors the rest of my life. And I said, that is not going to happen. So I knew all that was going on. So if you mention James Garrettson, there was a fraud involved somewhere.
Yeah, and I've heard there's care credit stuff. There's like Wayfair. There was something with girls or prostitutes.
Yeah, I do know a couple of people got their teeth fixed on a credit card from Garrettson.
Yeah.
I do know that. And then I do know that he had some loose women.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny reading. So Alan has James saved in his phone as pussy. So I thought it was funny.
There you go.
And so
probably some more places that money was going.
I've never, like, I'm 46. I went to Alabama. I'm not prude, I've seen it. I've done it. Not at the level that y'all have. Some of them have, but reading those text messages between Alan and James, certainly made me blush a little bit.
Yeah.
But to me, it makes sense that you've got an identity fraud guy setting up another guy with an ID, and then the identity fraud guy is the one that's filming himself scratching off for entertainment purposes only, but apparently he was wearing a wire for the feds at the time he did that. So that just seems like the word entrapment to me.
I mean, it seems like there's a lot of entrapment there. I mean, how do they convict Joe when no money changed hands to hire anybody to kill anybody? I mean, we all said it every day. That bitch needs to die.
Yeah.
I mean, she took me to federal court.
Yeah, I saw that.
I can't afford federal court. I had to do all that shit on my own.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a satchel over there, plumb full, 20 pounds of freaking court paperwork. And I'm afraid to get rid of it because I can still be called back.
Right.
Because I got dismissed without
Yeah,
prejudice or something like that.
Yeah.
Everybody else just got dismissed.
Yeah. Statutes of limitations will start working in y'all's favor with all this stuff soon. And that probably is,
I don't think it's 7 years yet.
It's not.
It's not.
It seems problematic for the feds. I don't know. I'm new to this, but it seems problematic for the feds to go dig up skeletons to show that animals were shot without actually doing some sort of autopsy or necropsy to determine if there was justification for them being shot.
They didn't want to know. They just wanted to know if he shot 5 cats. That's all they wanted to know.
Right.
The entire skeleton should have been sent to find out why they were euthanized.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. So that's the first one on the feds. I mean, they spent all that time and money to dig them up and only took the heads.
Jeff told me personally that, and he said he may have it on recording, that Bryant said, why would we want to confuse the jury about the health of these animals?
Yeah.
Well, that's not confusing the jury, that's misleading the
Yeah.
jury. But that seems to be, again, kind of how you said it on David Spade, provoked to do this. That seems kind of the setup of the story that certain people wanted, and they'd get there by any means necessary.
They had a motive to start with. I mean, they pushed it too hard.
When did you first get contacted by anybody related to this? Any federal official?
A federal official. Late. It was actually a long time, actually. And when I asked why they waited so long, they said they wanted to know who I was. They said they watched every video on YouTube, anything on the internet out there about me, they watched. And I honestly think I was the last one they talked to. It was late.
Was that Bryant?
Yeah, Matt Bryant, Amanda Green, and there was an FBI agent there, and he's the one that served me after it was all over with. But
With
that
a
was
subpoena for trial?
Yeah, that was a 4.5 hour questioning in a building in, I think it was Norman, I think.
Okay. So I have some screen grabs of text messages. October 17th. Mr. Reinke, this is Matt Bryant, federal agent out of OKC, and the case agent for Joe Maldonado investigation. Mr. Finley shared information that you would like to cooperate with the government and assist in the investigation. I would like to chat with you regarding your knowledge of activities at the zoo. Could you please give me a call number? Thank you, sir. And you respond, this fight is between Joe and Jeff, and I'm staying out of it. You were informed wrong by John Finley, so I'm sorry. Does that sound like something that you sent and received?
I may have.
Okay.
Because, I think, was it John Finley? Well, Jeff Lowe threatened, Reinke, you're going to jail, you're going to jail, you're going to jail. You need to talk to these people. And then I just ignored his ass. And then I think John Finley texted me too at some point.
What?
How did you get my text messages?
This was part of the criminal file. I guess through Bryant. So
How'd he get it?
he would have texted with you.
Oh, yeah, it'd be on his phone. Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
so because this is on his side.
Okay.
Like if it would be
I'm just
on
curious,
the other side.
because I know they took my phone before they interviewed me.
Did they?
Yeah, they made me lock my phone. Well, I didn't lock it. I left it on a counter.
Oh, 'cause
I
it
mean,
was
we
a
were like on
federal
an
building?
abandoned floor. I don't know how you call it a federal building, but I guess it is. It's just unmarked.
Yeah.
But there was nurses and stuff going in.
Do you think they did anything to it?
I don't know. You know, who knows? You know,
You don't.
You just don't know. I don't trust the government at all anymore.
No, I get that, especially for y'all.
But I mean, just the fact that who makes you give up their phone? But I can see why they don't want to be recorded on what they're doing. And
Well, they were.
And I mean,
they might have already known that they had been recorded by Jeff.
They may have. But this was just a building we met to talk. And I said, I mean, first thing I asked, do I need an attorney? He says, if you feel you need an attorney, we'll wait for an attorney. And I said, are you taking me to jail today? And he says, today we're not taking you to jail. So well, then I'll talk. I said, I have nothing to hide.
Right.
I did nothing wrong.
So the comment, this fight is between Joe and Jeff, and I'm staying out of it. Tell me about that.
You know, at that point, I knew I'd had the threats from Jeff. And John Finley had told me, hey, they're coming after you. I didn't do nothing wrong, and I knew I didn't do nothing wrong.
Right.
So I wasn't really worried about it. Jeff's just an evil person. I mean, he's scammed a lot of people in his life. I mean, call Robbie Knievel and ask him what he thinks about Jeff Lowe. I mean, Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just one. So I'm not, how do you say it? I'm not criminal enough to know how to deal with somebody like that.
Right.
So I wanted to stay out of it.
He's smooth.
He is smooth.
Super smooth.
I begged Joe not to give this park to him,
Yeah.
but he couldn't give it to me because I was still being sued by Carol.
Right.
Or it would have been in my name.
And that was the thing, is just try to get it away from
Carol. Keep it tied up as long as we could.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, do you know Carol owns the zoo? Yeah, we knew Carol would get the zoo sooner or later.
Yeah.
But
Which is another interesting thing.
if Joe wasn't in jail, he could have kept it tied up long enough that
For sure.
it wouldn't happen.
And there's a question of whether she did the property transfer right.
Whether Carol did or not?
Uh-huh.
Really?
Yeah. And so somebody else is looking into that.
I was ultimately in charge of all the animals.
Right.
I mean, it was me.
Did I bring that? Yeah, so you know, Joe has referenced these two pieces of evidence that were in the case repeatedly. And
I don't even have to look at that and probably know one of them what you're talking about.
what am I talking about?
Protocol to shoot a tiger if the
Exactly.
vet wasn't available.
Exactly.
It stayed pinned on my cork board all the time because the USDA always looked at it.
Okay.
It was brought up, it was in our vet log, and I kept a copy of it pinned on my cork board above my desk.
So how do I explain to the jury how that protocol was followed with the tigers?
Okay, we come up with that protocol. We asked about it and we ran it through the USDA because we had a tiger attack. When you got that many tigers, it's going to happen.
Right.
Okay, I don't care. The best dog's going to fight somebody one day.
Right.
Anyways, she got tore up pretty bad, and we couldn't get Doc Green there in time. We had to have a protocol to where we could euthanize that cat or stop him, whatever it took to get in control. And that's how that came about. I said, what do we do if we can't get Doc Green there in an emergency? Just let it suffer? Let it sit there? No. So we come up with the protocol to, and I say we, me, Doc Green, Joe, and the USDA, came up with a protocol allowing us to euthanize a cat by gunshot if necessary, if we couldn't get the vet there.
Okay. So what I've got to explain is kind of the conflict then between how those 5 cats were shot and whether it fit kind of the emergency use with the vet not being there. You know what I'm saying? How do I? First of all, who shot those cats?
Joe shot the cats.
Okay.
I wouldn't shoot a tiger. I loved them animals.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only reason I was there, was them animals.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't need all that drama. I didn't need the studio bullshit.
Yeah.
I didn't need all this YouTube stuff about me out here doing stuff Joe made me do. I didn't need all that. I was there for the animals and solely for the animals. You know, it's a gray area. I mean, we had permission to do it, and he did it. So that's a pretty gray area right there.
It is, because here's what this
We
sentence.
couldn't get a vet out there, and it had to be done.
Dr. Joe Green authorizes Joe Schreivogel or John Reinke to euthanize by gunshot in extreme emergency when an animal is suffering and she cannot arrive in time to prevent the animal from suffering. Well, we know the animals were suffering. And
So
you can't prevent them from, I mean, it's not written well enough
right.
to necessarily, I think a good lawyer would point that out.
Correct. You'd have to, because that's a pretty gray area right there.
But why is it gray?
Just because, I mean, define an emergency. Define why you couldn't get a vet, late at night. You got to look at our hours too. We didn't work 9 to 5. Okay, that was not our days. Okay, we worked 18 hours a day every day, 365 days a year, every day. So it's one of them. It's a gray area. I mean, explain to me what's an emergency. Explain to me. I mean, how many times you got to get wrote up before it's an emergency?
Yeah.
Write-ups are not good.
Yeah.
Ultimately, write-ups come into a dollar figure, and a dollar figure comes into closing the zoo. It's one opinion versus the other of what an emergency is. The cats need to be put down.
Right.
The cats were put down the most humane way you can put a cat down. But the big picture, Farmer Joe over here is not going to be able to go out in the field and shoot his horse anymore because he broke his leg.
Right. And the problem that I have is, how the hell are you going to know how bad these cats were if you leave
the body behind?
If you literally use a circular saw to chop the head off and leave the body behind?
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
You're not wrong.
Why? Tell me.
But
Tell the jury.
it's, you can't tell. You need the entire torso, everything, the entire body to figure out if that cat was in bad health or not. All they took was a skull, okay, because they'd been in the ground for a while. And now all they have is Lauren's word saying they were 2.5, 3-year-old cats that he shot. They were not, I assure you. Those cats were there way before me. That's how long them cats have been there. And that's how long them cats have been suffering because they were declawed wrong. And you can tell a cat that's been declawed wrong. It walks tenderly on its feet. Some days it don't even walk on it. It'll just limp and carry it. So they're in pain.
Yeah.
So at some point somebody's got to make the gesture of, because, now you can't declaw a cat now. I think Tim Stark's in trouble for that. He declawed a couple cats. I think Serenity Springs had a couple cats that were declawed because we got them, and I thought, this cat's too young to be declawed. I said, the law was, I want to say 2006. I think you couldn't declaw a cat. I mean, don't quote me on that, but somewhere around in there. And it's, so now you can't have them tender-footed cats and the USDA on your ass for not giving them arthritic medicine and because they're tender.
Ashley had a service animal that showed up a couple of days later, which started messing up one of Joe's trailers.
Ate the door.
Okay. And so they put the service animal in a cage or a kennel or something, and she called the cops and flipped out. And then all of a sudden, she goes and calls PETA and the feds and says, y'all are selling cubs for $45,000 each. Which would be nice, I guess, if you could sell cubs. And I don't know much, but I know that's 10 times the rate.
Yeah, more.
And so, the alleged rate. And so, there's one story that she leaves the park in a limo, and there's one that she takes to Greyhound. But ultimately, the feds attribute Ashley Webster as the first one to bring up the murder for hire stuff because she says, as a 3-day, 4-day person on the park, Jeff, Lauren, and Joe went to her and said, how about killing Carol Baskin? We'll give you $5,000. So that's my understanding of Ashley Webster. Yeah, it's all interesting. And there's a text message between Jeff and Agent Bryant where Jeff goes, oh my God, Alan and Ashley Webster were fucking. And Agent Bryant says, do not put this stuff in text messages, call me. Which shows, to me, an intent to hide evidence.
Yeah.
And so the mere fact, and it might be something small, but the mere fact the person who started the murder for hire whole calls Carol Baskin. And then you got Alan who is scheduled to commit the murder for hire, and they have some sort of relationship, probably should have been disclosed so somebody could cross-examine both of them on it.
Yeah.
But it leads me to a lot of questions. Now that I've mentioned the PTSD animal or service animal,
Yeah.
do you remember her?
I remember her, yeah.
Tell me what you remember.
I do. I remember her coming, and I think they hired her off the internet from Vegas,
It was from, I think it was out there.
Nevada.
Yeah.
Anyways, I do remember her dog eating the entire door off the house trailer. I mean, like ate it. And Joe just wigged out and said it's got to go in a kennel. It's got to go in a cage. And then I remember everything going south after that. But if I remember her right, she was not what Jeff and Lauren were looking for, because they were looking for this petite, good-looking thing to share a bed with.
Yeah, exactly.
And
they said, I don't remember which one it was, that she did not meet their standards.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they kicked her over to Alan.
Yeah.
And Alan says, yeah, they kicked her over to me and I appreciated it. and
I bet he did.
Ashley has this story that the park was full of drugs and sex and all that. I don't doubt it.
Look,
and
we couldn't control them house trailers, man.
But-
People were just all wadded up in there, and they wouldn't stay in their own trailers.
you can't be a hypocrite and say this place is terrible. It's filled with sex and drugs. When Alan's side is, yes, she was banging me,
Yeah.
one, and two, she gave me her PTSD pills,
Yeah.
and it was, the sex was better. I'm like, what in the world?
I don't know how much time had left, but Jeff was around then, because Jeff wasn't around when we went to Florida. But anyways, Jeff was around, and all Jeff did on his computer was just shop. He just did warehouse liquidation bullshit or something like that. So he's on the computer.
Which is
all
how
the
he got
time.
the felony.
Well, he had found, I guess it's Google Earth, I guess, and he had this big ass screen, and he pulled up Carol's property and said, look, this bitch rides her bicycle down this path every day. We could hide in this tree right here and just shoot her ass. I remember hearing all that. But he is as guilty as saying he wanted to kill her as Joe was. I mean, I heard it from Joe so much, it was just an everyday thing. A bitch needs to die.
Yeah.
And we said it on the show all the time.